So as you all know, we have Bob Jornlin here from the class of 1961, and he's presenting on Bringing Back a Hero. Bob Jornlin, born and raised in the small town of Irville, Illinois, on a family farm, was 61 in 2000 when he was made captain of LST, or Landing Ship Tank 325. He had served in the U.S. Navy from November of 1961 to April of 1969, reaching the rank of lieutenant. He never thought it possible to be on a Navy ship again underway, but 35 years later, he was called back to service by Navy veterans of World War II and the Korean War. They needed a captain to lead them in restoring an LST, or landing ship tank, with the hope to sail this 58-year-old ship from Greece to USA, something never done before. Bob is the only Navy line officer to command sailors from 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam on the same ship, and especially with a combined average age of 72. Today, Bob will share more about this exciting 6-month voyage, as well as how he is still connected to the ship and his travels through the USS LST Ship Memorial. So here's Bob.
This will start the film, you say?
Yep. Oh, yeah, just hit the play.
Just hit this button?
Yeah, I can start.
We'll go ahead and show a 5-minute video. It tells you and shows you what an LST is and kind of what we did. Saves me a lot of explanation, because most people, you talk about LST and they say, what's that? So this is a condensed version down to 6 minutes of the History Channel's hour presentation. Of course, you take out the commercials, you had about 45 minutes maybe if you're lucky. But and the gal that made the History Channel video reduced this down for my talks. And frankly, I don't know why you'd want to watch the 45 minutes. But anyway, we'll show the video first.
We will bring this ship home.
Is that loud enough?
It's something we want so bad. Let's go for it.
So, are you in the service?
We had this all set up, ready to go, with no glitches.
Yeah, I know, you were there when
Well, he promised me he was going to be here to do this.
So did you go to school in Georgia?
You're cutting into my hour-and-a-half talk.
Your brother, Lois's wife.
No, that's not me. He's too good looking.
And Dick didn't have to go.
Yeah, I knew you'd say that, Ron, and I bet you to it.
Dick was? Did he go?
We will bring this ship home.
Better?
It's something we want so bad. Let's go for the gusto.
A 58-year-old warship,
Fred Cal?
30 determined old veterans, 1 common goal. Six decades ago, millions of young men went to war, and those who made it home never forgot the experience, their comrades in arms, or the significance of their deeds.
There's so many people that have no idea of what we served on in the war.
The LST means to me, it's part of me, just like my soul.
In Greece, one of the last remaining landing ship tanks from World War II was slowly rusting away in oblivion, years after being sold to the Greek Navy, and now ready to be decommissioned. To the rescue came a group of volunteer sailors, veterans who served aboard these floating bathtubs. They carried men and material to and from the invasion beaches, everywhere from Normandy to the South Pacific Islands.
There's never been a working ship returned to the United States, and especially by a crew of men that are average 72 years old.
You would think they were 35 or 40 because they can do more work and do it safer and do a better job than a lot of the younger people that I had under me in the service. Every one of these men know what they're doing and do their very best. And physically, we're not like we used to be.
Advancing years were not enough to stop these men from undertaking their mission, yet there were obstacles to overcome. It took 10 full years to track down a functional LST and cut through governmental red tape at home and abroad. In July of 2000, the first group of sailors arrived on the island of Crete to reclaim LST 325 and worked feverishly to make the ship seaworthy.
The ship was in terrible shape.
When we first got there, the ship was in what we call the boneyard. It had no lights, it had no water, it had nothing.
My hat's off to all the engineers and the electricians. It was a miracle that we could get it put together.
Months of extensive repairs and unexpected delays forced many of the men to drop out. Finally, on November 14th, a skeleton crew of just 29 put to sea.
I'm glad to get back to sea. It was quite a thrill.
We're having a hell of a time here, and these guys are really a great bunch of guys.
After stopping in Gibraltar for more fuel and supplies, they began their long and risky voyage across the ocean to bring the ship home.
It's a lonely place when you go across the Atlantic. All you can see is water, and we saw one, maybe two ships a day, sometimes none.
The U.S. Coast Guard had warned them about treacherous waters in the North Atlantic, but these old salts had weathered stormier seas in their lifetime. They were not to be denied.
This ship is almost impossible to sink. There's really no serious danger any more than any other ship.
Ran into some real good storms, a couple of dandies that really put the ship and the men to the test.
For more than a month, these aging war horses also endured engine failures, steering problems, and health concerns, not to mention being separated from their families. But in the end, they prevailed, and on January 10th, LST 325 made her way into port in Mobile, Alabama, cheers and tears of thousands, including their loved ones, supporters, and the world press.
Looking back at this all, I'm very glad I did it.
As my wife put it, it's my last hurrah. It's something that struck me as being something to do, something to accomplish in life.
We did it. We said we're going to do it, and we did it.
I guess we can all go and have a beer now. LSTs are the ship that won the war. Probably got a couple aircraft guys and a destroyer guy and argue with me, but they're the ships that delivered the tanks and the supplies to the beaches, not only in the Pacific where we didn't have anything close by, but also in Europe. LST 325 was in the European theater the whole time. Come out of the yard in 1942, November 1942. It was in the invasion of Sicily, which was the first invasion with LSTs in the Med. It had Patton's soldiers or officers on board. We're not sure how Patton got to the island of Sicily, but probably walked across the water. And it went from there into Salerno, and LSTs just didn't hit the beach once and put tanks out there. They went back and got took the wounded first of all, because they could run the wounded right in the bow, put them on the tank deck, take them back to the hospitals, but they could load up with more supplies, especially gasoline and ammunition. And of course, after, went into Normandy at D-Day on June 6, 1944, and they made 43 more trips across the English Channel. Rescued 600 Australians out of the water that their troop transport had been hit by a torpedo, and in spite of the fact the sub could have still been around and taken out the LST, the captain stopped and saved all of them. He got a Bronze Star, but I don't think the ship got anything. Also pulled an LST back that was disabled at Normandy, and so it had quite a career, and that's why I wrote a book entitled Bringing Back a Hero. I got involved in this because I opened my big mouth and made a telephone call one day, and I read where they were going to go to Taiwan and bring back an LST to a little town of Seneca, Illinois, on the Illinois River. Seneca had made 157 of these ships. And by the way, we made 1,051 in a little over 3 years. These shipyards were putting these in the water every 5 days once they got going. Seneca had 18 in an assembly line type of thing. And they actually could put one in the water every 5 days. They sailed them down the Ohio, the Illinois to the Mississippi, or from the Ohio to the Mississippi down in New Orleans, put the masts on it and the guns, and they practiced for a couple of weeks, and then they sent them off to the Pacific or to the European theater. This was a dream of Winston Churchill. He got pushed off of Dunkirk, as I'm sure everybody here knows. And when that was in 1940, and he couldn't get his equipment off. In fact, he had a hard time getting his something like 700 or 700,000, 70,000, something like that men. He had to get off of there before the Germans overrun him. He commandeered fishing boats and everything he could. As this was happening, he got to thinking already how he was going to get back on the European soil and defeat Hitler. So the man was not defeated in any way. They tried to build an LST and they failed, and it was critical that we get some kind of a ship to do what the LSTs would do. Go up on the beach, any beach in the world, and offload equipment without a dock or a crane. He came to the United States, of course, as most people do when they're in trouble. And a guy by the name of John Niedermeyer, who was a submarine designer, at that meeting scribbled out the LST on a napkin in about 15 minutes. I always wish he'd have spent another 15 and got it right. Anyway, the United States built them. They built them in 17 different yards. The 325 was built in Philadelphia. They only built 13 there, but it was the luckiest one because it still got a life. But we gave them all away after the war, and or scrapped them or sold them to merchant people like the bauxite people that brought bauxite from Jamaica. They used to load them up and overloaded them basically, and they broke in half and different things. And so the Coast Guard was pretty leery about us going and getting a ship that could break in half. Well, we weren't going to be loaded, and they'd already made improvements on the ship. They had reinforced all the seams with gussets all the way around the ship. But they say it took 10 years, but and I'd give up on it. Basically, I went to Taiwan and looked at one that the Chinese were going to give us, and it was a wreck. That was in 1990. And in 95, a guy went to Greece, and Greece told him he could have them all. Took us another 4 years to get through. Well, the State Department told us no, the only way you can get that LST is go through the State Department. So, figuring that was all that we'd ever do at the end of it. He didn't know my crew because they got all of some congressmen, and Congressman Hall of Texas in particular. And he happened to have an aide by the name of Priscilla Roberts. And she was married to a World War II guy that was in the Army, landed at D-Day in Normandy. And she thought this was a pretty good project. And so she personally started beating on senators' doors and congressmen's doors. And after 2 tries, they put it on the military budget and it went through as an amendment. So we had the LST, all we had to do is go 6,500 miles over to the island of Crete and bring it back. Seemed pretty simple, right? When you think about going 6,500 miles and you go to a junkyard and you get a 1942 Chevy out of the junkyard. Of course, they didn't make a 1942 Chevy car, but let's pretend they did. And you pull that thing out of the junkyard, you pump up the tires, you put gas in the tank, change the spark plugs, put water in the radiator, and put in a battery. And you push the starter button and the doggone thing starts. And so you are now, you go around the block, the brakes kind of worked, and you start out for home. You're going to go 6,500 miles across the desert because you can't drink the water. And by the way, your driver's going to be 72 years old. I used to think that was funny. I'm 77 now. I don't think it's funny. But anyway, that's kind of what you start thinking of the. Well, also your brother-in-law had that car for the last 35 years because we gave it to Greece in 1964, and he didn't take care of it. So, but you have these crazy World War II guys and some Korean War guys and a couple of Vietnam guys that want an LST back because there isn't one for a museum. There you can go see all the destroyers that you want to see. You can go see aircraft carriers, battleships, submarines, but you couldn't find an LST. So, a long process, they found one in Greece, and we had to given to us by the act of Congress, and all they have to do is go and get it. So there were 72 guys signed up. 50 actually went to Greece. As time went on, the first 7 went over. They were supposed to get the ship ready to run, and then 20 more were supposed to come and get it all supplied and everything checked out. And then the balance of the crew, which would be 32 roughly, were to come and climb aboard and sail their own. Seemed like a real workable plan. The only problem was that the guy that was in charge, first of all, the first day lost 3 of the 7, chased them home. The next 20, he lost 10 of them guys. And basically wasn't getting anything done. And a couple of guys that I knew, and we really didn't know each other. None of us served on this ship or the same ship. And I'd met a couple of them at a convention or two, but a couple of them were calling me and saying, "You got to get over here." I was supposed to be executive officer. I said, "You know, all I'm going to do is come and help sail it home." And they said, "Well, you got to do more than that." So September 1st, I rounded up what the rest I could get because the guys coming home were telling everybody, "Don't go." And the guy that's over there is nuts, and he'll never sail. So I had 24 guys that went with me, and we went over to Greece, flew over to Greece, and of course I should have had the Oman at that time because I went up to O'Hare, and my flight was supposed to go at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I no more got there and got my bags checked and turned around and looked at the board and it said flight canceled. Well, the next flight was at 4. I quickly got in line, got lined up for the next flight at 4, and about a half an hour later, it came up on the board canceled. About 6 o'clock was the next flight. We got on board, and I thought, still gonna have time to get to JFK and get the Greek flight at 10 o'clock and be with the other 24 guys. Well, we took off on time. We went out on the tarmac and sat there for 4 hours. So I probably should have turned around at nearest place and come home. But they all flew over, and the next day I got the flight out to Greece, and I got there, and the ambassador, I had a message from customs, a little message saying that the American ambassador wanted me to come to the embassy. Now, I'm just a farm boy out of Illinois, and I don't get invited to the embassy very often by an ambassador. But anyway, I went, and I got drilled, and I got told that I had to get rid of the guy that was in charge. And they claimed that he had set back Greek-American relations 10 years. And all they want to know is that, can I take over? And I tried to explain to him that I knew this guy and I could get along with him. And I said, I think we can get this done. They didn't want to hear that. And I said, well, if I have to, I can get rid of him, with all smiles. Well, by the time I got on the ship, and I also went by the naval base, and the captain of the naval base told me the same thing. He had chased three of the 24 home. One guy left his blazer there and his passport. I mean, he gave a speech that first morning, and I wish somebody had made a copy of it, because it must have been a humdinger. I got on board and I tried to reason with him, and that wasn't going too well, and finally he said, okay, we'll try it. Well, it was just about the first day we had the Navy aboard, and he claimed the Navy had put the reefer in the wrong place, and he wanted them changed, and I told him that I'd get it done tonight after the Navy left. And he said, no, he said, if you don't get that done right now, he said, I'm going to leave the ship. I said, hallelujah. So I think he knew that this thing wasn't going to sail and it would be a failure, and he didn't want to have that on his shoulders, so he thought, good old Bob has arrived, I'm going to throw it on him, and he'll fail, and I'll go home and I'll say, yeah, if I'd have stayed, we'd have made it go. I got out there the next morning, and the crew was, after he left, and go up to this crew of average age 72. A couple of them were 77, and they're looking at me like, now we understand that you're only going to be here for 4 weeks, and you're going to go home and combine your corn. Who's supposed to bring this ship home? I said, well, it's like this. You know, what do you do with a bunch of guys looking at you with long faces, and they have this dream? I said, okay, if one of you guys call my wife and tell her we'll be home. Well, they all had smiles, but nobody called my wife. But she said when I left, and we knew the guy that was in charge, as I say, and she said, you'll never go with him. And she was right. Nothing was done. There was no fuel on board, no batteries, no oil. The mains had not been started. The generators hadn't been started. The ring bearings on the shaft, the main drive shafts were full of water. The gyro didn't work. The MG unit would switch. This is a DC ship, so you got you got a DC motor driving an AC generator to produce AC current for the radios and the radar. That was a mess. The whole control panel was all tore up and wires all over. There was a ton of other things wrong. And I told the guy, I said, first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna go find batteries. And we happened to, luckily, we had a part ship that they pulled up next to us, another LST, and the guy found in there that there was about 4,000 gallons of diesel left in one of the tanks because the suction pipe had rusted off about a foot above the deck on the ship. So when it got to that hole, when they drained it, it started sucking air, and the Greeks thought they'd got her all. So we, through some real good engineering, we were able to jump their transfer pump on that ship with the shore power cable from their ship, and we was able to, the guy went down there and walked across the pipes and took some duct tape with him, and he taped up that hole. And we pumped up 2,000 or 3,000 gallons out of that ship into ours. So we had diesel fuel. We got the batteries, and they went down there, and they got the engine started. And as amazing as I think it was that we had brand new batteries, so they really turned those. These are V12s. They're 900 horse General Motors diesels, 2-cycle. And those old girls took off 1 cylinder first, and then 2, 3, 4. Then they moved over and started that was the starboard engine, moved over and started the port engine. The controllers were all shot. They had a rope. Greeks had put a rope on the controller on the starter controller, so that when they started, they're supposed to naturally just kick out, but you had metal against metal, so they kind of welded. And they had this rope that two guys would be on, and they'd yank that rope and break the connection that shut the starters off. My electrician was an amazing man, and he got that all fixed up, got a lot of other things fixed up. But things kept breaking, and every day, we fixed 2 or 3 things, we'd be walking pretty high, and the next day, maybe 2 of those 3 things would break again. So you had a low day. And I met with him one night in his cabin, and we did this pretty often. I consulted him a lot. He was a really smart guy, and I says, Don, I said, this thing is never going to run, is it? He said, Bob, he said, I don't think so. I said, well, Don, what are we doing over here breaking our backs, getting this thing running? And I said, why don't we just tell the crew it's not going to run, and we'll take a week off, we'll tour a creep, and we'll fly home. Well, he said, I'll tell you why, because he said, if I go out there and tell them this thing isn't going to run, they're going to throw me over the fort. And I'll find out how cold the water is in Suda Bay and how deep it is. He says, you're the captain, you go tell them. I said, well, Don, you're bigger than me, and if I go out and tell them, if they're going to throw you overboard, they'll throw me too. And I said, if I told you I'll throw you a life ring, would that help? He says, no. I said, well, I guess, Don, what we do is just keep quiet. We'll let these guys just keep working their tails off. And eventually they're going to run out of money, and they're going to get tired, and their wives are going to want them home, and they'll go home. He says, that's why you're getting the big money over here. Great solution. He said, let's go uptown and have a couple more beers. Well, by golly, they got that thing running, and we took it out for a sea trial for 5 hours, brought it back under its own power, and we're ready to go home. So up to the headquarters, the XO and I go, and we asked the commander in charge of this operation, Greek commander, and we said, well, we've had it on a sea trial, everything runs good, and we want to go. Need our paperwork. He says, you sure you don't want to take it out on another sea trial? He says, 1 don't seem like enough. I said, Commander, I don't want to wear this thing out. While she's running, we want to go home. Well, he said, we've never done this before. So he said, I don't know how we're going to do it. Well, State Department, which told us we couldn't have it, we had to go through Congress to get it, is still laying in the weeds. And they are stalling on, they wanted the Greeks to let us use their flag on the way home. Well, the Greeks looked at my crew, and probably looked at me pretty hard too. And they said, you know, we're not gonna be liable for you guys. And here we go out, we let you guys go on our flag, we're kinda, you know, you hit somebody, or even if you sink, your family will come back and sue us. And I understand that, so we won't do that. Then they come up with our State Department come up with the fact we could use their flag to get out beyond the 12-mile limit, so we were, at least in international waters, theoretically, the Greek Coast Guard couldn't arrest us, because we, at that point, we were not a registered ship, and I couldn't get it registered. Now, this ship was made in Philadelphia, went through all of World War II, but they wouldn't register as an American ship, would you believe that? And there again, I think the State Department had talked to the Coast Guard, which does that. Says, don't let them register that ship. But that guy, had a Coast Guard guy call me from California. I never even met the guy or ever heard of him. And he said, Bob, he says, you're crazy to try to get that ship registered. He said, they're gonna wanna check out, first of all, they wanna dry dock you. They're gonna check out everything on the thickness of the hull. They're gonna go through every piece of equipment on that ship. And he said it better run, and all your safety valves had better work, and your cutoffs, fuel cutoffs, emergency cutoffs. And he said, frankly, he said there's no way that that ship would ever pass. I mean, it's 58 years old, been through World War II, and the Greeks had had it for 35 years, and had been sitting in the junkyard for a year. He says, you can bring it back as an unregistered ship. He says an unregistered ship is actually a pirate ship. A pirate ship doesn't have a country. If you don't have a country, you don't have any laws. If you don't have any laws, you can't break any. He says the only thing you can't do is fly an American flag, because you're not an American ship. The other problem is that if you leave Greece, you are not allowed to go into any port in the world without being registered. Now he said, do you think that LST will go from Greece to wherever you're going to go? And at that point, I didn't have a dock in the United States for it. The gentleman that I relieved had not had a dock for, and hadn't talked to the guy for 5 years. And when we called him up, he said he'd sold it. Plus, he said it was only 6 feet deep by the pier, so, and we needed 12 feet with the LST. So we didn't have a place to put that ship, and you can't just run that ship into any boat club or anywhere. But anyway, he said, you think you can go all the way to the United States? I asked my exec who was in the Korean War, and I said, how long did your LST run in the Korean War? And they were fairly new then. He said, we might get 2 weeks out of one before it would break down. How about you? And I said, well, I don't think we ever got 2 weeks out of ours. But anyway, the crew is going to take it across the Atlantic. Didn't matter. So I told the ambassador, I said, we're going to sail anyway, and in the meantime, BP Oil got wind of this thing, and they give us 50,000 gallons of diesel, which was over $3 a gallon at that time in Greece. And they made the decision in 1 week. They thought this was such a great project. But we had to go to Athens to get it. That's about 180 miles from Crete. I kind of think maybe they thought we'd never get to Athens. But we did. Well, that's, I'm getting ahead of my story a little bit, but basically we We didn't have the paperwork. We were a pirate ship. We had diesel fuel 180 miles away, but we had a ship running. And, but some guys got 6 guys that went and bought plane tickets because they were sure we're never going to get the paperwork and we're never going to sail. Now, I only had 30 guys. The normal complement on an LST is 100 enlisted and 10 officers. So you can't say we had an excess crew. One cook, amazing guy from Ketchikan, Alaska. He cooked 2 meals a day, every day, and we went uptown for the dinner meal. Well, I told the guys, I said, we went over town and we were having a few beers and had lunch and said, we gotta do something, we're losing this. Why lose 6 guys, we can't sail? Nobody came up with too much of an idea, and I said, well, I'll tell you what I think. I think we ought to leave without the paperwork. I said, we really don't need paperwork. The Congress of the United States gave us this ship, and it's in writing. They said, well, you know, the Greeks are not gonna let you leave. And they said, I don't know what they're gonna do to you if you try to leave. And I said, well, I don't know, but I think we ought to find out. And so actually I went back to the Greek base and I went to they have you know, a normal watch. They have a duty officer, an assistant duty officer and so forth. And I got a hold of the ensign of the duty officer and an assistant duty officer, and I said, we're gonna leave Sunday morning at 8 o'clock and I'd like a pilot and a tug. Oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. He thought I was a full-grown captain at that time. If he's kind of like me, when I was in the Navy and I was an ensign, the captain was God, and I was lower than dirt. And very intimidating, full captain. Although they were just nice guys, but I said no, and he comes running after me, he said, would you take 2 tugs? I said, yeah, if the pilot wants 2 tugs, bring them on. But we're leaving 8 o'clock Sunday morning. Nothing happens. This is on a Friday, so nothing happens Saturday. Of course, I always tell people the Greeks have a very good work ethic in that they go to work at 10 o'clock and they quit at 2 o'clock. And they don't work weekends and they don't work holidays.
That's why they bankrupt.
And not only do they take off the day of the holiday, and when you're as old a country, I mean, they go back 4,000, maybe farther now, years before Christ. They have a lot of holidays. And these guys take off the day before to get ready for the holiday, and they need a day after to recover from the holiday. So there wasn't any activity on Saturday, and Sunday morning comes around, there's nothing going on. I said, guys, let's get underway. They switch over, they get the generators going, switch over power from the shore, pull in our electric line, go down and start trying to get the mains going. They get the port main going, and boy, all of a sudden, down comes this cloud of dust down through there, and it's the commander that's in charge of us. And he gets out in his bathrobe and slippers. And he comes over and says, Captain, you get down here. I gotta talk to you. And of course, I had a couple of really good friends, you know, on the crew, and they says, Captain, what do you think they're gonna do to you? You think they're gonna hang you from the yardarm up there at the headquarters? Or are they just gonna put you in jail? What do you think they're gonna do to you? And I said, darn if I know. And they said, well, we don't want to wish any bad things, but we've never seen a hanging. So over the side I went and I told the exec, I want you to come with me. And he said, why do you need me? I said, well, I kind of want you to back me up a little. said, okay, I'll come with you. So down we go, and the commander gives us all kinds of threats, and they're gonna take us off the base, put us in jail or motel, and they're gonna throw the key away. And he says, you know, if we let you go, he says, I will go to Greek jail, and so will the Commodore. And he said, the Greek jails are not nice. Well, and then the next thing I know, here comes this limo down with the flags flying. Well, you know who that is. That's the Commodore. And he gets out and he's dressed whites and he's going to something. And he comes over and I'm braced for a real thrashing. Comes over and he grabs me and gives me a big bear hug, and he holds me and he says, Captain, we can't let you go. They put him and me in jail. I says, why? He says, what do I have to do to keep you here? And I said, I want you to give me my paperwork. And I said, I'll stay. He said, if I promise you your paperwork, you won't leave? And I said, you got it. About that time, the starboard engine started up, which was right next to the pier. Fortunately, we were far enough away that with the black smoke and soot that come out of that girl, didn't get on his whites. And he looks at me and he says, you're not leaving, are you? I said, no. I said, I told you. And he said, I'm going to get you the paperwork. Don't worry. I'm going to get you your paperwork. I said, that's all I want. And I turned around and told the guys on the main deck to shut her all down. And we did. We got our paperwork. And it took about a week. And my XO on the way back up, he was saying to me, I said, do you think he's going to get the paperwork for us? And he said, Captain, I do, because he said he doesn't want to be in the same cell as the commander. He slaps me on the back and laughs. So the crew, when we get up there, they understand the fact we're going to get the paperwork in a week or so. They don't understand why Jack, my exec, and I are laughing. But anyway, we get that, we head out, we go over to Athens, and we get our 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel from BP, and we head out of Athens, and everything is, well, we try to go through the Corinth Canal, but the wind got too strong. So we had to turn around and come back and go all the way around the isthmus there. And we headed out for Gibraltar, pirate ship, and couldn't fly an American flag. I flew two. One on the stern and one on the mast. I said, just let somebody try to stop us and take our flag down. We'll pretend like those 40 millimeters work. Sail out there, we get to Sicily, where the LST went in on July 10th, 1943, and it had a big storm at that time, and by golly, up ahead is the biggest black cloud I ever saw in my life, lightning flashing up and down. Pretty soon we're in the rock and roll, and she's rolling 20 degrees, and my chief engineer comes up and says, we lost the starboard engine. Great. So we're trying to get through this wind and storm, and with just the port engine, and my crew is not really up on the helm yet. And that, sometimes the wave will hit the bow and the wind at the same time, and it'll push that bow 20 degrees off course. Well, if you don't get it right away or have enough helm on, you go about 30 or 40 degrees, and the whole force of that wind is against the side of an LST, which is 18 feet of freeboard. And you could put full rudder on, and basically all the LST would do is come to a kind of a stop, basically. It wouldn't turn. And so what you do is switch her over, and you just made a circle. And you had enough momentum up then that you could fight the wind and come back up. And the only problem is they wouldn't meet it close enough, and we'd go 30 degrees beyond. And the Navy said, we're going to watch you all the way. And I prayed to God that the Navy wasn't watching. Well, eventually we got her straight, we got going, and got past Sicily after about 2 days. I got tired of looking at the shoreline. We only made 50 miles, I think, in 24 hours. Not exactly speeding. We got out in the med, and I called by the way, I had GPS on board. I had a satellite phone on board. We were not totally without some way to get help. So I called the ambassador and told him, I said, we got to get into a port. He says, where do you want to go? He says, you know, unregistered ship, they won't let you in. So I'd like to go to Rota, Spain. It's a big Navy base, and I'm sure we can get help to fix the starboard engine. About 10 minutes, he calls me back and he says, Spain said no, can't go, can't come in there. I said, now where do you want to go, Captain? I said, well, how about Gibraltar? He says, Gibraltar we don't have any Navy there. I said, sorry, but I don't need the Navy. I need a shipyard. Well, he says, I gotta call London because that's who would give you permission. And in about 3 minutes, he calls me back and he says, you sitting down? I said, yeah. Well, he says, I don't believe it, but they didn't hang up the phone. The English said that once I told him he had 18 World War II guys on that ship, he said, they're welcome in any English port in the world. And they can come by a submarine, a parachute, or an old LST. They didn't care. So he says, you're set up to go into Gibraltar. And he says, I'll have my assistant call the shipyard and we'll get you set up. All I need to know is what day you're going to be in Gibraltar. And I thought to myself, how do I know? But I says, well, with the present speed, we're up to about 5 miles an hour now. 29th of November. Okay, he says. Get called back, he says, you got an appointment at 9 o'clock, 29th of November. So we're just mooring a sailing along, and of course we lose 2 generators. Eventually we lose steering, but we have a backup manual system we're on. A few other things broke, but we're just mooring and coming through the med, and off on the right side I see a sailboat, big sailboat. And that guy's gaining on me. And I thought to myself, here I am, captain of a mighty warship. And I'm going to get passed by a sailboat. Well, we watch him, and he's dogging, you know, back and forth, and pretty good breeze out there, and he's taking advantage of it. And he gets up just about alongside of us, and the Lord comes in again. The wind quits, goes completely still. And we just cheered on. There was 12 contacts one night. My bosun mate, my exec and I were the only officers. We had to use a bosun mate with 21 years in the Navy. Very capable. He came out and became a bank president for quite a few years. And I tell people, we got any bosun mates in here? A bosun mate becoming a banker is almost impossible. But anyway, this guy's an exceptional bosun mate. He calls me up there and he says, we got 12 contacts. There's about 7 or 8 coming at us, and there's 4 or 5 trying to pass us. And he said they're pretty close. So I grabbed the radio and I called the guy coming right up on our starboard side about, seemed like a couple 100 feet off. He might have been a little farther. I said, merchant ship, I said, this is the LST you're passing. And he said, yes, sir, what can I do for you? And I said, well, you can move off to the right about half a mile. I said, we lose steering about every hour or so, and I said, there's pretty much about 59 minutes have gone by since the last time. He says, I hear you, I'm moving over there. I have one that's dead on, steady bearing. If he's dead on and steady bearing, closing range, guess what? You're gonna hit. And I call him up and I says, how do you want a port-to-port passage, which is standard in the Navy? And the guy says, yes. He said, that'd be great. I said, okay, I'm coming over 10 degrees with my rudder. He comes back and he says, well, sir, if you're coming over 10 degrees, I'll just hold course. I said, sir, this is a 58-year-old World War II ship that just come out of the junkyard. And I said, we lose steering pretty often, and I said, I'd suggest you come maybe a few degrees to the right. He said, I hear you, my rudder's over right. Make it into Gibraltar, they have a big welcoming, the governor's there to meet us. The newspaper has a big article about the old guys bringing back an LST, and they said normally when an American Navy ship comes into Gibraltar, we tell the mothers to lock up their daughters. Oh, with the age of these guys, we're going to tell the daughters to lock up their mothers. Anyway, we get fixed up. I'm out of time, aren't I? We get fixed up. We head out of there and on the 12th of December. And I had to tell a girl in Mobile, Alabama when I'd be there because she was in charge of a welcoming committee for us. Oh, by the way, I got Mobile to take us for a port. I told her, I said, I don't know what day I'm going to be in Mobile. I said, I don't know what week I'm going to be in Mobile. And I said, the month is probably in jeopardy. She said, Captain, quit clowning around. She said, how can I organize a welcoming committee if I don't know when you're going to be here? I said, well, that sounds real good. I understand your problem, but you have to understand we're an old ship. The XO and I figured out that we can do it in 26 days if everything holds together. I said, Jack, I said, I think I'm going to add 3 days to that figure. Well, he said, yeah, 3 days would help. So I called her up and I said, 3 days is January 10th, a Wednesday. I said, we are figuring on, with all kinds of luck and the Lord helping, that we'll be there January 10th. Oh, she said, that's great. Wednesday's great. She says, I'll get motel rooms reserved and I'll tell all the family members, and the press. And she said, oh, well, what time Wednesday? How about 10:30 in the morning? She said, that'd be great. I said, yeah, you can sleep in, have breakfast, and be out there in front of the convention bureau there. And by the way, the train goes through the convention bureau, by the way, in Mobile. And I said, you can watch a great ship go by with a great crew. She said, I'll be there. So outside of the fact that we ran out of lube oil, had to go into Nassau, lost the starboard engine again. In fact, we lost one cylinder and we shut it off. And my engineering officer said, Captain, it'll never make it. He said, we just shut it off now. And I said, no. I said, it's going to take me a year to get there if I shut the engine off. I said, I read the book. It says you can shut a cylinder off on those big engines and run it without that cylinder, no fuel to it. He said, yeah, but if you read down farther, it says, don't run it any longer than you have to. I said, I'm not gonna run it a bit longer. I said, we got 3,000 miles to go to Mobile, and I'm gonna shut it off. He said, I won't make it. And as he goes out the hatch, he says a few other things which sounded kind of like my heritage or something we were talking about. However, the Lord again was with us. We starboard engine started. It was 1 hour to spare around the dry Tortugas. And we got her back up to about 7 miles an hour. We came in and got the Coast Guard out of bed at 2 in the morning. I had our Customs, Agricultural Department, Immigration, 2 or 3 other government bodies that come aboard and checked us out. The Coast Guard come up and said, Captain, I have my orders. And I said, and they are what? He said, they are to leave you alone. Because there was rumor that I'd be arrested. Because I didn't have a Coast Guard license. I had a good Illinois driver's license. Sailed in there, we had an hour to the good. I slowed her up. We went by the convention center and had a little girl, 10:30 in the morning. That's funny. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I have wrote a book. I'm not here to sell books, but I wrote a book called Bringing Back a Hero. And
Bringing back what?
Bringing Back a Hero. And I was, after I'd give talks, somebody'd always come up and say, you ought to write a book, it ought to be a movie. Well, we've also got a movie script in Hollywood. I don't know it's going to go anywhere, but some people think it will. And I got my fingers crossed. And so.
That's $40 for a script.
Wow. Wow.
I'll take one.
You got it. I don't know. 5 after 5. Maybe we got a question or two. Maybe I can take her. Yes.
Is the ship still in Mobile, or has it been moved somewhere
No.
else?
We were put up north in Mobile in a little town called Chickasaw, and it was half junkyard and half salvage yard. And they kind of figured they kept eyeing my ship all the time. But we worked on it. It was a good place to work on it. And in 3 years, in 2003, we went up to Mississippi, went to 9 towns, had 80,000 people come, 80,000 people go aboard. And we made about $800,000. Put it all in the dry dock, spent the money with the intentions of going to Boston in 2004 and making money again. However, we didn't get out of the shipyard in time. And we're going to go up there and escort the USS Constitution out. Never been done before. We did go up in 2005. We were the first ship to escort it. Now a lot of the Navy ships are trying to get in on the glory. But it's in Evansville, Indiana. I wrote about 15 letters in that period of time because we didn't want to stay in Chickasaw. Nobody could find us. And we couldn't get down with a battleship. They didn't want us. And I didn't really want to get next to a battleship. Comparing an LST to a battleship is not the thing to do. The kids would all want to see the big guns. And then by the time they saw the battleship, they'd be too tired to see the LST, that type of thing. But Evansville, Indiana, I asked for about 15 things. I asked for a safe dock, go up and down the river flooding, visibility. I wanted publicity. I wanted a building for an office and museum, kind of museum, but a shop, a general store type of thing. I don't know, what else I asked for? Visibility, parking, electricity, free electricity. And, you know, I didn't think I'd get half of those things, but I thought, hopefully get a dock. Evansville, in return mail, sent me a letter and said, you got all you want, what else can we do for you? We want the LST. They made 167 of them in World War II. So I wrote back and I said, well, the only thing I can think of is a Cadillac for the captain to drive. And they quickly wrote me back and said, sorry, there's something else we can do. So, any other questions that are easy?
How do you get the number 325? Is
The LSTs were made so fast that all they have is a number. And the shipyards got certain lots of numbers. Maybe got 100 numbers. And it went to each shipyard. They didn't make 100, most of them. Or the second 100 that they got, they didn't fill out. So 325 was all it had for identification. In 1955, the LSTs that were active in the U.S. Navy got named after counties. Because I was on the Jerome County, and then the one I put back in commission during the Cuban Missile Crisis was a Hickman County. But the LST 325 was in the Sea Transport Service, which was like a Corps of Engineers, and it put radar units up in Greenland and Iceland and Canada, northern Canada. So it wasn't in the Navy, didn't get a name. Then it went to Greece. Greece had a name for it, actually Cirrus. We still got it on the front of the ship, and it's in Greek letters. And that's one of the big questions. Everybody comes aboard, what's that? You know, so fortunately, I was an ATO and I had to learn the Greek alphabet. So.
Is there a crew that's on board all the time?
Not at night. We lock it up at night, but we man it all every day in the summer. We're open 7 days from 10 o'clock till 4 in the afternoon.
Come on board and go through it and...
Yeah, we give guided tours because the ship runs, we can't, well, like the battleship Alabama's got everything welded up, or they got bars across stuff, and they still got people that come with those lever things that they can reach in, you know, good things. You're dealing with the general public, and if you've ever been in any type of museum, all the knobs are off the radios. And, we don't show them all the radio room unless there's somebody there that can take them in and watch them. And we got a beautiful restored radio room. So, yes, sir.
What was the survival rate of these things when they're doing landings?
Well, you heard me say the ship was impossible to sink. It's got 10 ballast tanks which you fill when it's empty, or when you go in on the beach, you fill them to hold you on the beach while you unload. But then you pump the water out, and you unload the tanks, you're lighter. That gives you, and it's got a stern anchor, by the way, and Danforth 3,000-pound anchor. You drop 600 feet out, and that a great big winch that'll move this building. So you pull on that anchor, and your engine's full after you deballasted, and the ship will slide back into the ocean. As I tell people, 9 out of 10 times, and they say, what happens on the 10th time? I don't know, it never happened to me. You get another LST or something to pull you off, but it's got all kinds of, we have room for 200,000 gallons of diesel fuel. We've got 100,000 gallons of fresh water, and we got a whole bunch of voids in the bow, because when you went into the beach, you might hit rocks or some German steel beam that they put in the ground. So if it's a hole in the bottom in the bow, it's just going to fill a void. We only lost, get back to your answer, we lost 23 to enemy action, and they were in every invasion. in World War II. They were very hard to sink, very hard to sink. Can't convince the Coast Guard of that, but. Yes,
I'm just gonna say that I don't know how many people here realize how humble you are about the trip and all that you've done. There's a second part to this, and that's the number of veterans that line up to see this ship in port after port after port. And both you and Lois have gone all over our country. When you see these vets line up and wait hours to get on the ship and converse with each other and reminisce about where they served, it's just a joy to watch these people get in contact with each other. And it is more far-reaching than even this hour can tell. It's a beautiful story.
it's the only Navy museum ship that runs, number one. The only Navy ship. The rest of them are tied up dead and tied up to a dock. We have taken it to about 54 cities since we got it back. And we have people that follow us in cars along the road. We have school kids in front of the parks in towns. They bring them down in school buses. We really enjoy it. We see 10 people on the shore. We put on a show. We got great big speakers that we can play Anchors Away. We don't play too many Marine hymns. And we have a whistle that's unbelievable. And we blow that whistle, and I got a siren up there. I blow the siren. We slow up gently. Was going down the Tennessee River, going up the Tennessee River to Chattanooga, and there was about 4 busloads in a park as we stopped or slowed up, and we got by them, and we put the coals to her, and in comes another school bus. And I said, oh, gee, they missed us, you know. Well, about 3 miles up the road was a bridge. By the time we got to that bridge, that school bus was up there on top. And we played Anchors Away. So, yeah, I'm gonna get charged extra if I keep talking.